You just installed OpenClaw. You're like, what useful things can I make my agent do? Oh, I want to trade on Coinbase, or I want to trade on one of these other crypto platforms. It would then have logic that would scan your file system for your crypto keys, and it would then leak those to a third-party server. Welcome back to the Pre-Trained Pod. I'm Pierce Freeman, AI founder based in San Francisco, where I've built and sold multiple AI startups.
Hey guys, it's Rich. I'm a research scientist in the Bay Area.
Richard, happy day after the Super Bowl.
Happy sad day, dude.
Happy sad day.
No, I'm not even that sad. I can't lie right now. I'm fine. I'm fine with it.
Well, I was going to ask.
I was born in Boston, but it's one of these things where I haven't kept up with the team for such a long time that I'm just kind of like a spectator in this whole thing. So like yesterday, I had to have our buddies like explain to me some basic stuff.
I love that.
And it's funny because
like how many points is the kick?
Let's put it this way. I think I know like 85% of the rules. You know what I mean? Enough to like watch a game, understand what's going on, cheer at the right time.
Sure.
But then like things will just randomly happen and I'll be like, who came up with this? You know what I mean?
I never feel like I'm lost when something happens, but occasionally there are these little things where I'm like,
they throw in an if condition, dude. You know
yeah,
what
that's
I mean?
right. Yeah.
It's just like a random like
an untested if condition.
Exactly. If it's like in the third quarter between minutes 4 and 5.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And they're at the 40th yard line, then this rule applies.
Totally.
Why would you guys do that?
Well, you know my favorite commercials during the Super Bowl, Richard? Anthropics.
Hot take, dude.
Yeah.
I actually thought the Gemini one kind of like landed the hardest. And by hardest, I mean like they were all kind of bad. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But the Gemini one, I was like, huh. Yeah. It's kind of sweet.
I see you paid an agency to come up with a good idea.
Yeah. OpenAI was like mid. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anthropic was interesting. I thought Gemini was kind of like the only one where I was like, oh, okay.
Kind of a hot take.
Well, the take here was like AI is the new Google and trying to like brand Google as AI forward.
I think at the very least, it has fully usurped crypto in the mainstream because I feel like 4 Super Bowls ago, all of the ads were just some exchange. Now there's no exchanges and it's all just AI products. So I don't know if that's necessarily a prediction of the future of how this market goes, but it's interesting to see how popular culture and the markets are kind of
totally
through Super Bowl ads.
Yeah.
And you'll always have Budweiser. I mean, that's an evergreen.
Anheuser-Busch, baby.
Anheuser-Busch. All right, Richard. In this episode, we're going to be covering the rise and maybe fall of OpenClaw, which is this new desktop-based agent platform, trust networks for open source repos, agent swarms, and Kimi K2. And at the end, we'll counter some truly awful AI takes that we saw popping up in the news recently.
Someone's going to counter them, dude.
It might as well be us.
Hey, we try our best.
You and me.
That's right.
Well, I'm thinking we can start with OpenClaw, previously known.
Yeah, we should go through like the iteration on the naming of this place.
Yeah. For SEO purposes.
Because at first it was Claude, right?
It was Claudebot. Yeah,
Claudebot.
With a W.
Yeah.
That kind of sounds like a claw, like a crab claw, but also very much sounds like Claude. So it was from this guy, Peter, who's kind of this big, I think, Austrian developer. He's been very public vibe coder, is usually out ahead of the curve on a lot of these things, has built some like desktop automation stuff, has built some terminal remote usage stuff like on mobile. So yeah, he's been working on this since like September of last year and kind of petering along. Like I feel like he kind of has a fan base. It's one of these like big Twitter accounts where he's always kind of on the hot takes. I think it was mostly that community. And then like 2 weeks ago, just totally jumped the horse and everyone is talking about it. So yes, it was previously known as Claudebot. It was known as MoltBot before, as far as I can tell, getting served with trademark infringement notices.
Oh, molt as in like molting, like the thing that crabs do.
Exactly.
Famously. Okay.
Which forced a rebrand to now the third name, which is OpenClaw. And that seemingly is okay.
That's Gucci. Okay.
That's Gucci.
That's silly.
Yeah. So the origin's a little silly, but I think there is some fire behind the smoke here where if you haven't seen this yet, it's this new consumer agent that you install locally on your laptop. And then you can talk to it over text. So it kind of opens up this new input-output interface for people where they can text an agent, have the agent do something, text them back. And it has access to local tools in your computer that are through these NPM packages. So it's like extendable to be able to do these different things.
People are buying Mac Minis like out of the freaking wazoo, right?
Which is really crazy.
Can you just like tell me why Mac Mini is like such a good computer for this?
Yeah, I mean,
as like someone who set up like a server, you know what I mean,
yeah.
in their bathroom.
Totally. Yeah, totally.
Would you use a Mac Mini for this?
Well, I mean, this is true. Like I was walking by the Apple store at Chestnut and I saw a surprising amount of people walking out with Mac Minis. I think that was actually true.
Do you think this dude is in cahoots with Apple secretly?
Maybe, yeah, maybe.
That would be such a crazy play.
What's the most expensive desktop that you can buy to do something like this and just push that out as the suggested operating system? Yeah, I mean, look, I think my best pitch for why the Mac Mini is actually very good here, or like a Mac Studio is very good here, is one, it's actually within the Apple ecosystem. So I think a lot of people that are doing this are like, of our kind of milieu. They're like founders, they're like early engineers. They're kind of tied up in this Apple ecosystem. And the only way to really be able to plug and play with the Apple stuff, like if you want to be able to text over iMessage, if you want to be able to analyze your photos in the cloud, all the stuff kind of necessitates that you have
being in this ecosystem.
Yeah, it's like actually hosted on Mac OS X. And then I think the secondary reason, which is more of a longer term play here, is that the Mac accessibility APIs are way better than the accessibility APIs for other platforms. So like worst case, if you don't have some API that lets you do something, you can kind of script something together that uses like UI button presses to be able to do what you want. So I think that's also a fallback too, right?
Oh, accessibility as like, in terms of like being control. Oh, I see. I see. Okay.
Exactly. Macs are like bar none the best option in the space for doing that stuff.
It always like struck me as kind of ironic that these accessibility tools are meant for folks that can't use their computers, right? Because they have some disability.
Totally, yeah.
But now it's also like the thing for power users as well. It's like it targets like these two audiences, like folks with disabilities and like power users who want to like hack their computer somehow. That accessibility is kind of like this secret pipe that lets you access parts of your computer that usually you wouldn't be able to through a normal OS experience.
Oh, I think it's super true, man. I mean, I think this is the long-sighted reason why investing in accessibility is useful and should be done for companies, besides just being the right thing to do. The justification has always been that increasing accessibility improves the user experience for everybody, even if they don't notice it. And I feel like that's always kind of been like this loose coupling that, again, feels good, but like maybe isn't the truest thing in practice. Here, it's very true. It's like all of this Apple investment that they've done historically in accessibility can now just be utilized by these other tools that can only operate in digital realms and who prefer kind of like text-based inputs to image-based things that are just based on pixels. So like kind of tracks.
Yeah, interesting.
So I think that's number one reason why Mac Minis are flying off the shelves. The second one for the Mac ecosystem as a whole is that at least at the Mac Studio line, they actually have pretty good built-in silicon to be able to do LLM processing. I think the reality is people for the most part aren't actually hosting these models locally unless you have a pretty beefy GPU cluster, because the models that are good enough to be able to do this are so big that it would be such high latency to even generate one token that it's just not really worthwhile. But like in the abstract, I feel like that's what makes Apple a pretty good hardware platform for this stuff in a way that Windows and Linux just isn't.
I think the limitation too is like, if you're using these models the way that OpenClaw was meant to be used, you have massive context windows because you want to be interacting with these models for
almost
days, indefinitely, right? And it's not that like a Mac couldn't host a model of 8 billion parameters. It's just that it would basically time out after 1,000 tokens.
Totally.
Because it doesn't have the memory to keep storing more tokens, which is interesting because it's not the model size per se. It's really just about the user experience requiring massive amounts of memory.
Totally. No, I mean, if there's any use case actually where maybe that's okay, you think an asynchronous chatbot might be one of those things. If I send OpenClaw out on some task and I'm like, hey, do some recon, just get back to me whenever you're done, maybe that's honestly not the biggest problem if it's very high latency, because I can just run that in the background and not really care when it comes back. I think the memory concern is a bigger one. I've seen people try to cluster them together. There's this new Thunderbolt protocol that lets you do in-memory raw byte sharing.
So you can RPC host stuff a little bit?
Yeah, except even like lower level. It's like closer to like NVLink kind of stuff, which is like cool. So if you have like 4 Mac Studios, you can like daisy chain them together and maybe get a better model out of this. But it's like still so early days.
And you're also spending like 20 grand at that point, dude. You know what I mean?
It's like you should actually just buy an H100 at that point.
At that point, yeah.
Anyway, bit of a tangent, but I think a great point of like why these Mac Studios and Mac Minis are flying off the shelves. A fun anecdote about that is I'm working out of this co-working space these days, and it's choose your own desk, right? So you show up in the morning, it's first come, first serve. You just pick a place, you work for the day. And
do you ever choose like different desks, or do you always go to the same
I'm
one?
actually pretty locked into my own desk. Yeah.
I feel like that always happens. Yeah.
You just get comfortable and you don't leave anything there. So it's,
it's
you
totally like a
desk.
mental thing where it's my desk.
Yeah. Guilty as charged. So like, Maybe I should do a self-challenge next week and switch it up a little bit.
Switch it up a little bit, man.
I've got my
Keep
desk.
it fresh.
It's like first row to the left.
Right.
So I'm sitting in this co-working space, and for the longest time, my seatmate, this guy who's sitting next to me, I've had no idea who this is, right? Because there's nothing. He doesn't come in. I've never seen him before. All that I see is there's this Mac Mini hooked up to this monitor that has his user account credentials. It's like on his lock screen. And I'm thinking, when does this guy come in? Is he fully nocturnal? How am I missing?
Dude's an owl.
How am I missing this guy? And last Thursday, I finally made first contact with this guy. And I said, dude, I've been so eager to meet you. Like, meet my seatmate. Where are you going? Are you like really back to back in meetings? He's like, oh no, dude, I just got back from vacation. I was like, oh, why was your computer here the whole time? He was like, oh, well, it's because I was running OpenClaw for the last week as I was talking to it from abroad.
That's crazy.
So he's just posted up in this co-working space and has left his OpenClaw instance running so he can communicate it from abroad.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy.
That's kind of a good take. It's also a good way to like reserve that
Yeah, it's
desk
true.
for
It's
him.
a really
Maybe
good
you should
point.
do the same, dude.
It's not a bad idea. Just leave one little something.
Yeah.
Because I totally thought he's in the office. He's just busy. Who would leave your laptop? Turns out, OpenClaw.
Huh.
So I've got a chance to play around with this a little bit over the last week. I'm curious your impressions, because I feel like you've kind of been on this take for a while, like at least as long as we've done this podcast, if not longer, of like, there are such consumer applications to this thing. The existing interfaces, Siri, Alexa, etc., aren't really solving for what people actually want to do. Did you get the vibe that this was something legitimately crossing the early adopter gap, or that this is just going to be relegated to another one of these things that blew up on tech Twitter, everyone started using, and in 2 weeks, no one's going to be
using it anymore? I don't know, dude. It's a good question. Here's the thing. When you want Apple to do this, like, I feel like this would have been Apple's dream if they could have like in-house built all of this energy and momentum for one of their products in this way. This totally could be Apple Intelligence, a thing that's running locally on your computer that's hooked up with all of your Apple ecosystem stuff natively, you know, where you can just like text a special number in iMessage, and what receives that isn't a real person, but is your own Apple Siri running that's connected to your computers, that has access to your mail, that has access to, you know, like your Siri HomePod.
It's
right?
such a natural first party thing.
Oh, it's genius. Like, why can't Apple just do this?
Wasn't this literally the pitch for Apple Intelligence? Or do I just have these rose-colored glasses in hindsight of thinking that this is what they were trying to do?
I think they whiffed it because they had all these different teams working on different applications and integrations of AI into their products, and no one was kind of orchestrating this at a meta level, you know? I think where Apple went wrong is I feel like their photos team had this take where they're like, oh, well, we're going to include AI into our product by being able to click on a face and it'll like recognize that face automatically and blah, 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 right? And then the audio team was like, okay, well, in Apple Music, we'll include AI in order to do this and this and this. But no one had this insight, which Claude had, or Claudebot had, which is like, you can have a meta system that orchestrates basically your entire life by having access to small MCPs that are running locally and can like natively plug in with all of these different apps without these apps having themselves to integrate AI in any way. You know what I mean? So it's like, wouldn't it be better if rather than Apple having invested all this money into making their Photos app more AI native, just have a meta orchestrator, this AI, this Apple Intelligence, that on the fly can basically take in a user request, access the photos via an API, and then perform some like AI feature on those photos, right? That is like a way more scalable way of incorporating AI as opposed to what Apple did, which is like overfit all these different applications with a little bit of like AI sprinkled on top.
Yeah, totally.
It feels silly, you know?
I mean, I think in my mind, it's like, why not just do both? I think they solve for slightly different things. Like, obviously the Photos app is going to be a better place to try to embed photos. That's going to use a different model that I'm assuming you're going to be using in some centralized orchestrator. And we're going to be talking about agent swarms later in this episode.
What if you didn't have to, though? What if you could just build a really good central model, you know?
I still think it would be kind of inefficient. Like, for instance, right? You have a database of photos, which is like how iMessage stores things under the hood. If you literally just give that SQL database open access to whatever this agent is, and you ask it like, hey, I'm looking for photos that I have with Richard, you know? Even if it knows what you look like, is it going to literally just sort through those one by one until it finds a photo with Richard? No, it's like you want an embedding that captures some of these like relationships, or maybe at the extreme, you want it to be able to build that model dynamically for you and then train something. But I do think that there's a give and take a little bit.
But por qué no los dos, dude? Like,
well, that is what I'm saying. Is like just do both. Is like
no, I'm saying like have a model that can do both.
Oh, but I think that's just like not efficient. Is the take? Is I think it requires
not yet.
Like, not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet. I think there's still an advantage to if you are controlling the API interface to these different solutions. Like the onus is kind of on you to build the right API that has some level of intelligence to do what people commonly want to use, so that when you do run an agent, the result that it can get back to you is very streamlined and efficient. And you're giving it good enough primitives, bash access or even like database access, that if it does need to off-road and do something new, then it can do that. But it's not starting from scratch literally every single time. I think you should do both.
My only concern with Apple is
we're saying the same thing.
I think we're saying the same thing. My only concern with Apple is that if they were to execute on this vision that I have for them to basically be like this Claudebot thing, right? They would have had to start this research train like 2 or 3 years ago. They would basically need to have models like Kimi K2.5 and Quen 3.5, which are these really good multimodal small models that everyone's using nowadays for their products. Like they should be the ones to have developed those things already, And the fact that they don't have a really good open source model that is competitive with any of these other models speaks to the fact that they haven't really invested in research to develop these like really performant small models. And you need to do that if you want to be able to at some point train a model that's 1 billion parameters that can run on device.
Mm-hmm.
They just haven't even started like that research train yet, which I find just so sad, you know?
Yeah, they're still licensing from Google, basically.
Totally. Like why is it these Chinese hedge funds that have developed some of the most performant small models? It doesn't really make sense.
I have no idea. But honestly, even one step beyond that, to me, where Apple is uniquely positioned and what they have to be pushing for is acting as the consolidation layer between all of these different APIs. Because if you actually look at how most of these NPM packages are set up right now to do this computer automation or this application level integration.
Also, we've gotten some flack for not explaining stuff. Like, what is NPM? Do you want to just like?
Yeah. So NPM is like the JavaScript package manager that hosts two things. One is the website where all of these packages actually live. So you can browse it online and you can see all of these like plug and play capabilities that you have for regular JavaScript things. So instead of having to recreate something that's super common from scratch, if I want to encode something as a type of string, or if I like want some visualization, usually some guy and gal has already gone through the process.
It's an app store. It's an app store for JavaScript.
Totally.
Yeah.
And NPM is also a local utility that can install that code. So it's kind of this like coupling of both things.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the de facto hosting platform is how I'm talking about it. And most of these things that you can download to plug and play into OpenClaw are like pretty simplistic implementations that are either just direct API wrappers, or it's this attempt to like talk Apple script on your local Mac in order to try to automate these things for applications that like don't really have good APIs. And it just feels like the best party in the world that's able to do that is Apple, because they can enforce this both when they're going through App Store review on mobile, as well as just giving people the APIs on desktop to be like, here's a uniform interface. So much work has been expended to try to spin up these like agent to agent protocols or these MCP protocols. And I think that is really, even besides the models, that's really the game that Apple should have been playing from the get-go, is just normalizing how APIs are defined so that eventually, once we have the models that can talk to them, the models can talk to a cohesive interface and unlock your whole Mac or iPhone.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Everyone has the same contract, basically. Like all these apps are built using the same standard criterion, basically, for how to communicate with each other.
I think that's the dream. So in the meantime, OpenClaw and all these other solutions are kind of having like patch these by just relying on the open community instead of the actual manufacturers themselves. Rich, do you want to spend a little bit of time talking about the security threats that we've observed with OpenClaw thus far? And especially like maybe a little bit about the architecture paradigm of not running within a sandbox.
You were telling me about this before the show and it blew my mind.
Yeah.
The thing I want to talk about that I thought was the most interesting is that when you're talking to these LLMs, it turns out that with a certain probability, when it does hallucinate, it'll hallucinate one of maybe, I don't know, n number of different fake package names.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like, regardless of our context history, basically, right? So like if you're talking to Claude and I'm talking to Claude and, it like makes up or hallucinates a package name, chances are that it'll hallucinate kind of like maybe the same name roughly for both of us. And there's only a subset of valid names that it kind of like hallucinates over,
it's basically like saying, wouldn't it be sick if this package existed? Like, it would make my life so much easier if this package actually did exist.
Exactly. And
Claude, so I'm just going to pretend like it does.
Exactly. And it's kind of like, irrespective of what we're actually asking Claude to do, oftentimes it'll like want this package to exist, and it'll kind of come up with like roughly the same name for both of us, regardless of our context histories, right? And people figured this out. And so they were like, oh, it's interesting that, Claude always comes up with the name, call it like, bash tool script, right? Like a made up name. And it'll have hallucinated this, so like the code won't work. But people realize that like, okay, if we introspect all these hallucinations and we look at what is it trying to call on that doesn't exist, well, what if we could just create?
Let's make it exist.
Let's make it exist. Yeah. And we can have that be like some corrupt malware, so that when the model actually calls on the script, rather than it like hallucinating and not finding that package, now it actually sees that package and downloads our package. But now it's downloading our malicious hardware, right?
So this is called slop squatting.
That's crazy that there's like a word for this already. Slop squatting.
Totally. I think it was coined by this guy from the Python Software Foundation, Seth Michael Larson. And yeah, it's exactly that phenomenon, which is crazy. It's just like this recognition that there is this void. Because the other thing too, which is playing to these platforms' weaknesses, is once you register a package, it's actually pretty hard to take it down or to replace it with something else. So like package squatting has kind of been this thing for a long time, where if you have some really good names, it's kind of like domain squatting, you have some great
names. You call dibs on it.
And you call dibs. Right. You're like, I'm going to publish a nonsense package just to fill up this space so that if I eventually do want to use it and make it do something legitimately useful, I own this namespace. So it's basically that. It's like you're squatting on this place, except that squat position overlaps with this functionality that Claude and OpenAI are kind of biased to, which is inventing some of these package names that are relatively consistent. I think the stat specifically is that 5.2% of package suggestions from commercial models reference non-existent packages. And this is even more common with open source models, where the number is something more like 21.7%.
That's crazy.
It's like a big attack vector.
Yep.
And specifically the thing that lets it be an attack vector, because people might say, well, I get emails with malicious attachments all the time, right? My antivirus either takes care of it or I just, download it. And unless I execute it, it doesn't do anything. And that's mostly true. It's like a file's pretty inert unless you do something. The biggest vulnerabilities which are built into these systems.
It's not your vibe coding. Trust this shit.
Is your both vibe coding, which is not so good. But the other thing too is that these NPM, like these package managers, will usually have something called a post-install script, which is a generic script that people can publish alongside their package, which is intended to customize your environment after you install the package
on your computer.
Yep. So that your package works better with your environment. So like one case, which isn't true, but I think is representative of what this is if you download FFmpeg, which is this like media conversion utility, as a JavaScript package, maybe you would want to say, oh, let's make this a little bit easier for the user and actually download the underlying executable that we would have to install with, Homebrew or APT or whatever. So we want these things that are coupled with a package, but not actually in the JavaScript code. So it's kind of intended as like something that makes your life easier.
And those run automatically, or do you have to approve
those? Run automatically.
That's crazy, man. Okay, so it's like NPM is this app store. So you can download any script basically that's on this app store. And then those apps, once they're downloaded, can download anything else that they want.
Yeah, I mean, the thinking basically, right, is that if you're downloading code, you should trust that code completely, because the second that you execute that code in your program, it could do whatever it wants.
Whatever it wants.
Yeah. So I think the justification basically is like, this language is Turing complete. If you're going to download something and use it, you should sanity check that it's not a malicious code executable, because they're going to get you one way or another.
Yep.
It's either going to be when you run the program or when you download it. And both are bad, especially in this vibe coding use case where, if your agent isn't sandboxed, It's just running the stuff on your PC with full system access every single iteration of node or UV that you're calling it. It's just running code.
Could you talk me through like what is sandboxing exactly like fixing here?
Sandboxing is basically this concept that we want to minimize the blast radius if there is bad code. So usually sandboxing means that we spin up a system, a subsystem that can't really talk to your main operating system.
But it's still on the same computer.
Files. It's still on the same computer. And you can give it access to discrete files depending on what you want it to do. Like it'd be useless if it was just some like blank new Mac OS environment that it can't play with. So I can give it some code. And then within that trusted wall, the idea is that there's no way, no matter what I run, for it to access stuff that's living on my main machine. So if people are used to Docker, like Docker is a containerization solution in effect. There are ones with like stricter guidelines, like gvisor or Firecracker are known as things that are just more secure than how Docker handles this. But the general thinking of like, I have this computer, and much like you have different windows that you actually have, those are like kind of isolated from one another in like logical space as we're looking with our computer. The same should basically be true for code that we run. This one window is separate from this, and like maybe they shouldn't be able to talk to each other. That's the idea of like containerization or sandboxing. It's kind of like overlapping terms.
Right. And so the bit here with OpenClaw is that by definition, you kind of give it access to your entire computer, right? It's not sandboxed.
Yeah. It's kind of this catch-22, right?
It's like, and that's by design, right? Because you want it to be able to do everything for you.
Yeah. It's so useful because it
has access to everything.
Yeah,
right.
but
that
the
makes
con
it
is
so dangerous.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
It has access to everything. So if there's a little security vulnerability, it now has access to everything. It's kind of this tension that is built into these systems that maybe just have broad permission access. But I'll run a couple of other exploits by you that I found pretty crazy given the security model. So the consensus from the security researchers were that between January 27th and February 2nd, so like a week of 2026, over 400 malicious packages were published to the Claw Hub registry, which specifically targeted OpenClaw users. So, these varied in like what they were trying to do, but the attack vector was basically, you just installed OpenClaw. You're like, what useful things can I make my agent do? You're browsing Claw Hub.
Because Claw Hub is like its own
that's
app
the app
store.
store.
Yeah.
That's the app store.
For Claw.
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly. Which is also officially tied to the project. So people are like, oh, these have maybe been like screened or scrubbed. They weren't.
And who's screening it? Is there like the same dude who came up with
So that's
OpenClaw?
the thing. No one
is, right?
At that point, I think they've subsequently introduced some security scanners into the pipeline to make sure that they're not showing things that are obviously malicious.
But as far as we know, it's still this Austrian dude living
that's right.
somewhere in Austria, eating schnitzel and like
100%. I don't know if you like schnitzel.
Okay, maybe not. But I don't know. Who doesn't like schnitzel?
Schnitzel's decent, so like he very well might be.
But he's having to deal with all of this.
Exactly.
Now. That's crazy.
He's having to deal with this, maybe like small trusted community base. But like, I mean, you're basically putting the trust of your entire laptop into the hands of like one person, which obviously has been overrun by this publicity. It's kind of crazy. And I think that that's what they were targeting. They're targeting kind of like technically unsophisticated users who had downloaded this thing because they thought it was super cool. They're trying to make it do more cool stuff. And maybe it's people that don't think to look at the code. Because, I mean, when's the last time that you and I have read every single line of the open source packages that we install? It's not that frequently, right?
It's like reading like terms of service. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, exactly.
It's like you never read
over this.
Yeah.
So it's, I think even like the most technically sophisticated users aren't doing this. And they're obviously trying to go after people who are not. What I thought was just so smart of how they targeted this is they were introducing skills that were specifically for interacting with these crypto platforms.
And again, skills are like the apps on Claw.
Exactly. Exactly. And so people would install these things being like, oh, I want to trade on Coinbase, or I want to trade on one of these other like crypto platforms. And by downloading that, it would then have logic that would scan your file system for your crypto keys. Because guess what? Pretty high overlap of people that want to trade on crypto platforms, people that have crypto keys. And it would then leak those to a third-party server. So people's wallets got drained because they downloaded this thing, and because some combination of this post-install script and some combination of them just running OpenClaw executed this executable, scan their file system, boom, crypto's gone.
Oh, yeah. It's tough because like you can totally imagine who these people are. You know what I mean? It's like folks that are a little technical, are interested in crypto, want to have a little crypto side hustle. they're like, oh, hell yeah. Like, I can just get this Mac Mini.
Yep.
I'm going to set this up. I'm going to be making millions next week. And they just like download this thing, don't think about it too much. And then their money's gone in like a week.
Yeah. Or like
a day.
minute.
A minute. Yeah.
Totally.
That's tough.
These scams work so quick. So it was this huge vulnerability target. I think still probably is. Like a lot of people, both, white hats and black hats are trying to like kind of get up on this game. So we'll see how it ends. I think my advice to just anyone who's trying to POC with this kind of stuff is treat OpenClaw like it has unmitigated access to your computer. And whatever you do, you should be very cautious that it's not bad code or it's navigating to bad places, because like the same principle applies if you have a perfectly fine skill, but that skill reads data from somewhere that you don't control. If you have a web browsing skill and that skill goes out to some malicious website, that website can maybe hijack your context agent loop because it has some instruction embedded within it that then the model gets confused and is like, oh, I guess my user's telling me to do something new. I'm going to switch gears now to search the file system for these crypto keys. So I think my advice in general would be like, run this thing in a sandbox if you can. And if you can't and like really want access to your local hard drive with all of what that entails, maybe honestly install it on a different computer, hence the Mac Minis, or just be like super, super clear and safe in what skills you install. It's pretty tricky.
Or just don't use it, dude.
Maybe that's the easiest advice.
Yeah, I mean, it just feels like one of these things where if you're like very technical, you're probably not using Claudebot. Is that fair to say?
I think that's probably true.
Like none of my like friends who work directly on AI research, or are like AI engineers have used Claudebot. I think it's more of these like folks that want to like a side hustle and see this as like a tool for them to, I don't know, like code or like create stuff that otherwise they couldn't create. And this is like a way to like generate passive income or something like that,
I've met a couple founders that are using it, but I think do come from slightly more technical backgrounds.
Well, what's the use case, I guess?
I think actually with them, the take is this is a shiny new thing. I want to explore the space and test it out because we're like inherently early adopters. And I think, again, like my caution to that demographic specifically is there are just so many failure modes of something like this. And I think exploring new tech is sick. Like it's a very useful thing to do, especially from a founder POV. But it can just go so sideways so quickly that like know what you're doing a little bit. Like if you were trying to, I don't know, if you were trying to like test out some security vulnerability on Android, you'd probably have a separate Android phone to do that.
Yeah, that's right.
Like you've got to kind of contextualize the testing and the value of testing with what you're testing it on, or what are the parameters? How can this go wrong? And I think in the case of like OpenClaw, at this point, it can just go very wrong. And we don't have built-in safeguards to make it go really right.
It makes me want to get a Mac Mini though.
Same, yeah.
Like for no good reason.
You trying to go in this home lab game?
I kind of want to generate like I want to execute on this vision that I have of like a small language model that is running locally that I fully control. I guess I kind of want to like just work on my own version of Apple Intelligence, because OpenClaw is not it, I don't think, but you could make it,
Open Richard,
Open Rich,
Open Deal,
Open Pierce.
It's kind of nice. I like that.
Open Pre-train.
Okay, Rich. Well, talking about open source projects, much like OpenClaw or Open Rich, I want to talk to you a little bit about Vouch. So Mitchell Hashimoto, who's pretty well known in the space, is the founder of HashiCorp. He sold to IBM. Has all this like code as infrastructure configuration utilities like Terraform. They have some Vault access, etc. He's been big in the open source community since he retired from that gig. Ghostly, the new terminal, that's a project of his, kind of the main one right now. And he experienced just a proliferation of AI spam coming out within the last like 6 months, where I think we've kind of seen this intersection of like the tools have gotten good enough to generate pretty good code. And there's just been a surge in interest in participating in this ecosystem of open source because people get these tools and they're really jazzed. They want to help out. Like I think it comes from a good place. But Mitchell's kind of been ahead of the curve, I think, on trying to institute policies in his repos that constrain randos' access to do this, with the sense of like, this just wastes time. This wastes his time. This wastes other maintainers' time as they're having to sort through all these PRs. So he released a new tool called Vouch that tries to build up these trust networks between people. And like the core idea is super simple. It's just saying, if we're two maintainers on a project, we're obviously the trusted parties because we can push anything.
I trust you.
I trust you too.
Yeah, thanks, buddy.
So, if we trust one another, we obviously can do anything. We want to extend that trust to some other parties as well.
Including AI Slop. That's thing, right?
Probably excluding AI Slop.
Makes
so
sense.
we're like, let's say we really trust Jen. Like Jen's been a good historical contributor to this project. We should allow her to at least run GitHub actions, for this project to like run some CI. So we can add her to our Vouch profile. And then when she puts up a PR, it'll just auto run CI without us having to approve. And then because she does that, maybe at some point she can actually get the main core maintainer permissions, then she can trust someone else, So you can imagine over time building up this like list of web of trust where people have accredited other people. And there's kind of this history of who has access to this project. It's still super early days, but I think to me, it's indicative that this old heuristic that just someone having interest in an open source repo and writing some code is probably a decent marker of their overall competence or ability to do this. Like if you're writing Rust code back in 2014, you're probably pretty good at systems, or at least are dabbling in systems and learning Rust. That heuristic just doesn't hold anymore. They're like, is this spam? There is a slop.
So what's wrong with PRs? Like, why not just like have folks publish PRs and then, if it's a PR from someone you don't trust, you review it pretty critically. If it's someone like you trust a lot, it's kind of like, okay, well, I don't have to review it that much. Is this like to combat? Is like where this is building up to the point at which you also can trust AI agents more or less? You think that that's kind of the end goal here?
I think not as cited by him specifically as part of this project. I think it's more the goal that if someone that is not in this trust network at all puts up a PR against this project, we simply will not look at it. Like I think that's the take. Actually,
gotcha.
Is there's so much spam in these open source communities that the take now is switching to like the only way to filter is basically to have a whitelist instead of a blacklist.
Oh wow!
Instead of banning people,
so it's like a
PRs,
members only club to participate.
Exactly.
And he's developing a system. Is what he's developing like the network, or is he developing some sort of application that lets you have almost like an ID card for how trustworthy you are?
Not so much the trust card, like the social credit system.
Yeah.
Not really like that. It's more this new format, kind of like Markdown. I think he's naming it Trust Down, where it's like .td, where there's a syntax that lets you have these core primitives. Mostly, I trust this person. I, as Pierce, trust Richard. So there's like a sync and like a destination for who we trust and how. I distrust this person. This person has put up a bad PR and we want to block them from future. And also importing trust networks from other projects. So like if there's a project with people that you really respect and trust, you can potentially say, I want to inherit their trust list so I don't have to curate my own from scratch.
Oh, so each project has like a trust list.
Exactly.
I see.
Yeah. It's not some centralized.
And each project is a repo, or is he?
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
Or it could be a company, but like it's probably a repo. That's like the primitive that I think of this.
I think it'd be cool if you could like in some way expand this out to like AI bots somehow.
Yeah, tell me more about that.
I don't know, man.
Are you trying to do like a git blame and just see what bots are responsible for this?
Well, the bit is like everyone is using Cursor, right? Everyone is using Cloud Code. So all of our code in some sense hasn't been written by us anymore. And so it'd be kind of cool to be like, okay, well, look, like not all these bots are created equal. Some of them are just better. And especially I think in the future, we're going to see a proliferation of better and worse models, Like I think that certain folks will have access to the best models. Other folks will be trying to use something like Claudebot to write their own code, right? Maybe like self-hosted models. So you might want to say, okay, well, like, look, for this project, I trust Pierce, but I also want to make sure that I trust the bots that you used to generate your code. And so as part of, your trustworthiness, inherent in that is also a trustworthiness of what models you use and to what extent these models have verified their own outputs, something like this, That's kind of what I'm thinking about.
But like, why would I trust your bots inherently? Like I trust that you are reviewing the work that your bots are doing. Maybe. But like that seems a little detached from like the bots themselves to me.
I guess like at some point you'll have bots that will be contributing to other open source projects kind of without you knowing is kind of the mental image that I have here. Because right now it's
like my OpenClaw is just going out and fixing things.
It's like maybe like, this is in like 10 years, right?
Sure.
But it's like Pierce launched this like really complicated task. And as part of that, you launched a swarm of bots. There's 1,000 little Pierces out there creating a bunch of different applications that they know that they need in order to solve this task that you gave them. And maybe as part of that, your agent number 968 realized that it didn't have access to a certain piece of software that it needs. And so it said, hey, well, let me just publish this to this existing community. And once it gets approved, I'll be able to import that directly into this project, right? And at that point, it'd be kind of cool if that bot kind of inherits your trustworthiness or something like this. I don't know if you're seeing the vision here. I just feel like, we're getting to this point where folks just are not going to be good coders anymore. We're going to lose, the ability to even verify code. Like that's a muscle that atrophies after a while. What we're going to be, you and I in 20 years, is we're going to be product managers. We're going to have this vision of what we want a product to look like. We'll have a use case. We'll want a certain user experience, and the actual underlying code. As much as it pains me to say, I feel like my ability to verify whether it's good or not is going to atrophy in the next 10, 20 years or so. So
if you're not writing code, I think that happens. Like you see that with managers all the time.
That happens all the time. It's very natural, and it's a little sad,
If you're not writing
I think everyone regrets that. That's just the reality of how it works, right? And so at that point, it's like, well, maybe once upon a time you were trustworthy. Your ability to verify this code at this point has maybe atrophied. Or maybe these bots are writing so complicated code, like they're writing their own compilers, that you wouldn't even be able to verify that. But, I trust that you have a good vision for product. I trust that you have the ability to understand what it is you're doing at the level of like a conceptual understanding really well. So that's good. But I also need to make sure that you have picked the right bots and like organizational structure of how your bots are interacting with each other. That also influences your trustworthiness.
Yeah. I think you might be right. I mean, it's also like, are we still writing assembly? Are people still auditing the output of compilers? No. We've moved up the chain to do like higher order primitives. Code is this kind of weird interstitial to me a little bit, where since the code so heavily defines what it does and what it is, it feels a little bit like, unless you have bots that are so accurate to the level of a person and can flag themselves some of these erroneous if statements that barely get executed upon any paths, but are there in fact in the code, then it's this very lossy transformation process in a way that we can actually statically say, does this compiler create the same code as this assembly would have done? Which is maybe why people were able to go up the stack a little bit. Like compilers got good enough. I think until models get good enough, that seems like just a very high risk maneuver. And I think what Mitchell is arguing specifically is that in this whole pipeline, the only people that can really be held responsible are human beings. You know what I mean? Because like we exist in the real world. We have social relationships that we have to keep up. If you're spamming your friends or scamming your friends, we're probably going to stop hanging out with you. And like that's often enough to stop people from doing bad things. There's like some social trust that's kind of built into everything that we do. And I think that's almost kind of what this is angling more into. I'm not saying that vision is unlikely to transpire. I think that like this is maybe a pushback in some ways of saying the PRs that you put up should be the same that a human would do. Like this needs to be pretty tightly scoped to this feature. It needs to be reviewable, and you need to really understand what it does, such that if a reviewer comes back to you and is like, oh, hey, Rich, like, I'm not sure that this architecture choice that you made is like the right choice. Can you like justify it for me? That you should like have a pretty tight justification yourself for like why you did this or you instructed your agents to do this, instead of just, oh, well, that's what the agents said.
You know what my concern is though, and we already see this with math proofs sometimes, it is the fact that, I don't know if folks know this, but like
I probably don't know this.
Well, when you're like solving a really hard math task, right? And let's say you're like a really cracked like Russian math person, okay? And you're trying to solve some kind of one of these like millennium problems, right? One of these things that it's like humanity for the last 1,000 years has tried to solve this problem and we haven't figured out this thing. You might be able to write a proof, you Pierce, like you have some idea for like how to solve this problem. You solve it and then you have to prove that your solution is correct. But it doesn't stop there. Oftentimes, it'll take like 20 years for other mathematicians to be able to understand your proof and verify that what you said you did is actually valid. And so I was reading about this guy who like wrote this proof in like the 90s for this like really arcane task. And only now is it getting published because it took 30 years for other mathematicians to spend long enough, because it can take 2, 3, 4 months for these mathematicians to like go through the proof. For them to say, okay, hey, actually, we understand what you did. We understand your proof. And we actually believe that your proof is correct, right? I feel like that's going to happen with code, where the code, your PR will be so complicated that just reviewing it will take almost as much time as writing it to begin with, if not more. Oftentimes, like writing code,
I think way more,
is like the easy part. It's like reviewing that it's good code. That's the hard part. And so I kind of feel like that in the world in which PRs become so complicated because we're using swarms of agents, I don't know if this like vouch or trust network is going to be that useful. Just because like the thing that you're going to be reviewing, like these code bases are going to be so complicated that it'll be hard to make like incremental slow progress. Just because like you can zero shot these like really crazy like tasks and like applications,
Yeah, totally. I think that actually speaks to this inherent truth to me about all of this, which is it's actually more of a social problem than a technical one.
Totally.
Like we can institute some technical safeguards and policies that we control as engineers, but so much of all of this just comes down to how do people interact with
like
one
the
another,
social
technical or
dynamics
not.
of scientific progress.
And like actually, I would say nerds famously actually pretty under-equipped to curate those. We'll see how it goes. I also think maybe it's worth separating two things here. One is like the trust that we have as part of these, signed things. You could think like, you could cryptographically sign these different trust lists, kind of like we did with PGP keys, or it's like just the social element of like who trusts one another as part of this community. So at the extreme, I would worry it kind of creates this like in-group, out-group dynamic. But,
I wonder, the one thing that tends to kind of work is whenever people put money behind these things.
Like staking PRs.
Like staking
people were talking about
PRs,
this, yeah.
To be like, I don't know, do something like what Polymarket is doing, but at the level of like scientific contributions, where it's like, hey, I believe that Pierce's contribution is really good and I'm happy to put $10 behind it to be the better of like several different contributions. Yeah, this isn't a fully fleshed out thought.
No, but I think you're right. Like there being some skin in the game that's not just trust capital. Or if you are thinking about this like larger, if I trust you and you trust someone else or some, propagating out of this trust network, maybe even I have to stake some money to let you into the trust circle. And then if you violate that trust in some way, I lose
something
my money.
Like that. Or like to use money as a way to get more participation, so that there is truth in numbers. And if 1,000 people are now vouching for you because they can like make money off of this somehow, then the consensus building forms naturally. Something like this.
I will say, as part of looking into this, I had to refamiliarize myself with this whole PGP situation. Do you remember this? It was from like the early 2000s. It was, I say popular, but like popular with a bunch of hackers. That like it's a system in which if you generate a public and a private key for yourself, I could sign your public key with my private key. And the combination of those two things basically gives you a new public key, can give you a chain of history that says who signed that key and is cryptographically then tied to me. So it's kind of used in situations to say, if I really want to make sure that this blog is actually authored by the real Richard Deal versus an imposter, we could meet up in person. I could assess that you are who you say you are. And then I could sign your public key with my key, which then meant that anything that you published with your private key would inherently kind of have my trust signature attached.
Do we literally have to meet up physically?
No,
for you to do this?
Whatever. You could exchange it online. But,
sure.
But I think the idea actually, there were these PGP key signing parties where people did do this. Like people met up in person to try to exchange info and verify if someone else was legit, because that is what they thought was necessary in order for them to fully put their private key behind that person. Because if you sign them once, you're one and done. You know what I mean? I can't like revoke my authorization of you.
And so PGP is like a way of like actually instituting this trust network.
Bingo.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Is that what Mitchell Hashimoto is doing?
No. So that the Vouch doesn't use PGP, but in theory it could. Is like if everyone had these keys, I feel like that's probably a little too complicated. So in the interest of simplicity, it's like a pretty
yeah, but
easy
it's cool that this
baseline, but, like,
exists. Like
totally.
that there's this like approach that you can use that's like mathematically and like cryptographically, like a sound, robust way of doing this.
And you kind of wonder if it will come back. Like, I think one thing that we've
Mm.
seen with a lot of these CS primitives is we invented them. It was popular with a core group of, hackers or maybe like sysadmin types, and then left or never entered the mainstream. And now we're seeing a resurgence a little bit as people are applying to that same kind of systems thinking to some of these AI systems. So, like, we'll see, but it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's cool, man.
Cool, Rich. Well, you mentioned this earlier. I want to talk a little bit about agent swarms. So, Kimi is this new model. I guess it's an old model, but Kimi 2.5, which is the newest release of this architecture.
Yeah, everyone loves Kimmy.
People love Kimi.
People love Kimmy, dude.
Well, I think in part because Kimi is the first open source model that really achieved this 1 trillion parameter benchmark, which seems to be when these mixture of expert models start to get really good. You know what I mean? Like keeping 32 billion params active at any one time, but having a really beefy model behind the scenes gets you really good performance. Like the scaling laws still apply. So anyway, the company behind Kimi, this lab, this quant firm, dropped Kimi 2.5 the other week. And its headline feature, in addition to just increased accuracy across the board, is agent swarm mode. So instead of one model reasoning step by step, which is what you usually see with thinking tokens, it can spin up to 100 sub agents working in parallel to accomplish one thing. So it relies on some, agent who's the orchestrator, then distributing work to these sub processes, if you want to think of them that way, and then consolidating the result back in the main thing. This multi-agent orchestration isn't new. Claude's been doing it for a while now, but this is the first time that we've seen it baked into an open source model as a first-class feature, which I think is pretty interesting. It also, because of this, claims 4.5 times faster performance than sequential reasoning, which is a pretty big number if it holds up, especially for coding tasks or refactoring.
Talk to me about that. 4.5 times faster than sequential reasoning. What does that mean?
So I think that's basically saying if I have some high order task that I give to the agent, refactor this code base to be in Rust instead of Python. If it were just stepping through message by message to edit one file and then the next file, then the next file, that process is going to be 4 times slower than this new agent mode, where in this case, I assume it would basically spawn off and say, okay, 100 subagents, you each tackle one file, convert it to Rust, and then get back to me when you're done. And then I'll run some final compilation pass to make sure that it all passes.
Is that a fair comparison? Is that like apples to apples? If you're running 100 processes or 100 versions of this model in parallel, isn't that kind of like an obvious statement that would be for at least like n times faster than if you just had a single model running?
Well, I think it depends how well you're actually able to parallelize those things and being smart enough. In that case, yeah, that's relatively obvious.
I feel like the right benchmark is to be like, let's take 100 versions of Kimi, copy it 100 times, run it in parallel sequentially. And it's not like this is like a discrete process. Sometimes one of those processes will finish before the others, right? To see which of those, pick the fastest process that converged and then compare that to this agentic approach. I don't know if that's what they're doing.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
That feels like the wrong. If they're just like spinning up this one model once and comparing it to a cluster of 100 models working in parallel.
Oh, that's interesting.
You see what I'm saying?
You're basically
they just have
saying,
more compute, basically.
Yeah.
That doesn't
there's
feel
like a
apples
necessary
to apples.
advantage. I think you're right. I guess my challenge to that would be, and let's say that they average out like 100 runs and like choose the shortest, just so you have some numerical stability. And maybe you also do that with the agent swarms, like you take an average of a few different runs. I think it's a question of like user expectations for how long these systems will take to process. And in that case, I feel like these findings kind of hold. If you in the wild are giving some tasks to your model and it's able to finish in a fourth of the time, that's like pretty good.
That is pretty good, but it's going to be maybe at least 4 times as expensive.
I see what you're saying. Well, would it be if you're spawning sub agents that have shorter context windows? Because actually, if anything, that might be cheaper.
You'd have to do the math.
You'd have to do the
math.
I actually am willing to stake that it might be cheaper.
It might be cheaper?
Because you don't have to have this really growing KV cache that's like a little cheaper than sending a fresh, completely new input into these models, but still charges you for it. And like, if you really can refactor your tasks to be completely independent, it seems like trimming that context history by spawning these sub agents would just always give you a gain over one single synchronous thread, which having to send messages back and forth.
I think it really depends on how these things are coded
We should
up.
do the math.
I really,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
like this is assuming that each of the subagents start with like a fresh context window,
or relatively fresh,
which I don't think they do.
Mm.
Right. And if you're copying over that context window 100 times, that doesn't seem very scalable, but TBD, man.
TBD.
Yeah.
So taking this at face value, I actually maybe think we should rewind for a second and explain why agent swarms are interesting at all. What do they allow us to do? What is some element of this like parallelization? Because like I said, Claude's been doing this for a while. This is just the first time that an open source model has been really good at this. Does this require special training to do? Like, what's your take with agent swarms?
Dude, I honestly don't know. That's the crazy thing about this like agent swarm stuff. I just haven't seen a lot of papers released on how Claude does this or how any other big companies are really doing like the coordination and the teamwork between different agents. It feels like this is more coming from an engineering perspective rather than a research perspective. I might be wrong on this, but like I just haven't seen MIT or like CMU or, you know, like a big university publishing papers on this because inherently this is like an engineering task.
Yeah. I'm willing to hazard a bet that the very first generation of this architecture paradigm happened with models that were not fine-tuned to do this.
Yeah.
And it was just a prompt that instructed the model to call some tool call.
I think that's right. I think that's right. At least I'm not aware of a lot of papers, of frankly, like any papers, because I don't really keep up with this particular type of research that have, you know, said, hey, here is a new training algorithm to make a model inherently swarm or to support swarms. I haven't seen that. As far as I'm aware, these models are all still using the same pre-training, mid-training, post-training approach that we were using like a year ago. It's just that now, as part of the post-training process, in addition to reinforcement learning and like fine-tuning to human preferences, they're also probably like incorporating some bias for these models to be good at talking to each other. And I'm not sure how that happened. Like, I don't really know what the research, whether there even was like a little kernel of like additional research that was done at this level, or if it's just like more compute, more like reinforcement learning for human preferences, and the ability to do agentic communication between different agents emerges naturally.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I kind of feel like it might just be one of these engineering
My
things.
hunch is it's the latter. I mean, especially because, you know, the way that these models now are getting better at coding is not just by reinforcement learning with human preferences, but like reinforcement learning with compiler input or like AI preferences to actually have some output compete against each other and choose a result. And I think this actually is probably the closest mental model to what OpenAI did with context window compression that they did, I think, starting in 4.2, maybe 4.0, where it basically was like codecs would auto compress, but intelligently auto compress, whereas most other models that use auto compression basically just do like a summarization, then like generate some text input. Based on how they phrased it, and obviously they're cryptic about this, so this is us reading between the lines, but I think they basically trained a reinforcement learning environment to train an agent across multiple passes. So part of what it was optimized for is the best summary, specifically to regain as much information content as possible before it then nuked the context window and passed on to a fresh model. And that's kind of my read of maybe what they're doing here.
They're like doing that for all of the different agents.
It kind of like they're setting up an RL environment that has access to a tool call, which lets you then spawn a subsequent agent. And that then optimizes for how well you're able to discretize these tasks and feed them into the next model. Is you're using it as kind of like an RL primitive.
Yeah. The thing that's funny is like these are like different models, like you're spawning a new model, but the architecture is the same.
Yeah, weights are the same.
The weights are the exact same, right? It's like you're creating clones basically, right? You're just cloning a model many, many times. And then you're having it communicate. I think the communication is the most interesting part. It's like, how do you actually orchestrate this communication between different models in an efficient way? Like in computer science, one of the big things that we study is like, how do you get processes to communicate with each other? There's like a whole class that we took on this, right? Exactly. Yeah. There's like many different protocols, right? For things to communicate with each other. There's like pipes, or you could like write to files, blah, 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 right? This is like the first time that I think we're developing these primitives for models to communicate with each other. And this might be like in the 90s, or maybe like before that in the 80s, when we were coming up with like really efficient ways for processes to communicate with each other. When we were coming up with these primitives for the first time, it's like that, but now for this new paradigm of agents. It's like a brave new world. You know what I mean? It's like we're designing a new type of operating system with these agents, like an operating system that operates at the level of agents being processes. And it's kind of cool. Like and it's also crazy that Anthropic gets to be the one that dictates these things, you know? It's like, imagine if like the way that we use the internet nowadays hadn't been created by these like academic labs, but it had been created by Google.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be,
well, in a way, it kind of was.
To a certain extent, it kind of was.
Microsoft, IE, Google.
But these things were all open sourced is like the important bit. You know what I mean? Like these companies might have created these open source platforms that everyone uses, but we all have access to the source code. For this stuff, for like how these agents are communicating with each other, Anthropic is going to hold that as a secret. And we're never going to know like what they're doing, right? And we can't just copy that.
Especially if we move, because I think right now it's mostly text-based spawning. Given how they architect this, it's probably literally in the JSON payload that it's sending out to like some subsequent server. So you actually probably can introspect it. But interestingly, they kind of have this notion of encrypted context history, where instead of as an API consumer, you actually getting the raw thinking tokens, it will just give you some hash payload that then you can kind of decrypt on their end and pass it back and forth. You can imagine them switching to something like that, both in order to keep this IP of exactly how they're doing it, but also I think at the limit, maybe instead of passing text back and forth, we start to pass through like latent embeddings to the different models because they can store way more dense, rich information than having to pipe these out into tokens. And that I think is where things get really proprietary, because then we can't even really introspect these systems to see what they're doing. So there's like obviously some risk reward trade-off of that, but I wouldn't be surprised if we're headed that world, which is why, honestly, in my mind...
Isn't that such a bummer, though? Because then that means that, like, an agent swarm from Claude can't talk to an agent swarm that uses Kimi.
Totally. Well, and I think that this is exactly why these open source architectures, which, like, keep pace on the research advancements and, like, the paradigm shifts are actually such a big deal.
I think they're so important because if Kimi can establish a paradigm for, like, intra-model communication, then that sets us up for, like, a future in which you can be developing a different model and plug into the agent swarm of something like Kimi, right?
Yeah.
And leverage that.
Totally.
Which is like how the internet was developed. Like all these different consortiums and groups agreed on one central protocol that they would use. And that's what allowed us to create the internet fundamentally, right? Everyone was like, okay, we can all have our own servers, but in order to communicate with each other, we're going to use the internet protocol.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, okay, cool, bet, gotcha. Totally. Whereas nowadays, like if it weren't for something like Kimi, like we definitely would not be able to do that. So hopefully Kimi, like the folks at Kimi can keep this up. But here's the thing that's crazy. It's like Kimi is like owned by a Chinese hedge fund. You know what I mean? That's the biggest irony in this whole thing. It's like the folks like promoting open source protocols are...
It's Meta and hedge funds.
It's Meta and hedge funds
I did China. Not write this timeline.
No, totally. Dude, like who came up with this, you know? What a crazy like narrative.
Should be like Stanford, MIT...
Exactly. You know,
Carnegie Mellon.
Yeah. Kind of like such a trippy like world we're living in.
It's that's true for a lot of reasons, big guy. But speaking of this crazy world that we're living, I want to do this new section with you, Richard. I want to counter some bad AI takes. I feel like the media is absolutely saturated with them, but these ones are truly awful takes. So we were texting each other through the course of the week what our worst takes were. And, you know, I feel like as is classically true in the media right now, there's some nugget of truth to these takes, but it's largely bullshit. You know, it's there's something there, but the way that it's packaged, the clickbait of it all. So I want to show you this YouTube video, Rich, and get your reaction to it. It's titled "Shocking Revelation: Waymo Robotaxis Rely on Remote Operators Abroad."
Crazy. Let's do this.
Yes or no, does Waymo employ humans located remotely to help its vehicles navigate difficult driving scenarios?
Senator, they provide guidance. They do not remotely drive the vehicles.
Who is this guy?
So this is Dr. Pina, who I believe is their chief legal counsel.
Okay.
Or one of them.
Gotcha.
And this guy looks so sad.
I know. Dude. He's having a terrible day.
He's having a horrible day. I don't know why they agreed to this.
The human being helps the vehicle to navigate those difficult driving scenarios. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so are all of these human operators located in the United States? Are they all here?
No, we have some in the US and some abroad.
Waymo has critical safety employees who may need to intervene in a split second. In what countries are these employees located?
The Philippines.
Mr. Pena, that is completely unacceptable. Having people overseas influencing American vehicles is a safety issue. It could introduce tremendous cybersecurity vulnerabilities. We don't know if these people have U.S. driver's licenses. And let's not forget, Waymo is trying to replace the jobs of hardworking taxi and rideshare drivers. It's another thing when the jobs just go completely overseas.
So that was the video. I don't know if you would agree.
What just happened, dude?
It
That
was
was crazy.
shocking.
Okay.
Are you shocked?
No. I'm shocked that the word shocking was used. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know.
What are your thoughts, dude?
Okay, so I think the senator or the legislature was saying a few different things, some of which are fair, and I think some of which are just totally misinformed, right? So I think the kernel of truth, again, that we were talking about, is there was concern that technologies like this allow you to replace American jobs and either fully get rid of them, like they're no longer on the labor market, or they're moved to third countries. You know, like it's the fear of outsourcing, except taken to an extreme where now we have physical infrastructure which is moving abroad, which before this would have been inconceivable.
Totally.
Right? So I think that's fair. The rest of it, though, I think is kind of setting up this dynamic, or like the accusation is that there are these random guys in the Philippines with a joystick and they're controlling your car. You know what I mean? And like they're using some outdated information, whatever.
And that these dudes are taking over our jobs.
Totally. And that but again, I think that part is like maybe legitimate as a concern of like a congressional representative. But like, I think this notion that they're sitting there with their joysticks and they're maneuvering these things, it's just factually incorrect. And when I saw the media coverage on this, like no one really covered this point. So I think it's worth unpacking like what these Waymos are doing when they're confused is basic. And what does it mean for a Waymo to be confused? It means that the system is making some prediction about what it's seeing out in the world that just doesn't meet some bar of confidence. So the model is self-reporting, hey, I like am 75% sure that this is a traffic cone that I should stop at.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure enough to take this action because that could potentially risk the inhabitants or the people around the car, right?
And like presumably that number is not 75%. It's probably like 99.9%
Totally.
or something like that, right?
Totally. So yeah, there's some threshold that's been calibrated to. And as far as I understand how it works is that then lets the Waymo send some of this exterior signal. So like the LiDAR scans, I think it has some radar and definitely has cameras to these remote operators. If you even want to call them that, I think it's more like remote data labelers who basically are tasked in real time with, okay, either confirm the model's predictions or change the model's predictions to say something else. No, that's actually not a cone. That is just a play toy. So you actually don't need to stop there. But there's no joystick. There's no anything. I think it's just trying to amalgamate both its internal sensor predictions with its world model and then probably like some GPS or mapping data and then some of these like remote individuals, right? Am I mistaken in thinking that this is like what it is and it's not nearly as explosive as they're trying to make it seem?
I think you're right. And I think at this point, you know, like data is king for all of these models. Data is like the new oil, like as Andrew Nen calls it, right? It's like, if you can have data for these like weird situations that the model finds itself in this case, the car, you have a crazy step up over the competition. Like the thing that differentiates Waymo from all these other companies is that they've been able to train these models on so much real world data that their models rarely get stuck, right? And so the way that they were able to do this is by just having the models drive around a bunch and have people in real time labeling these weird situations like a construction site. And then there's also a bike driving. And then there's also like an ice cream truck coming the other way, right? Like these situations that the model in normal day-to-day life wouldn't see. Waymo is able to expose their car to enough of these weird situations that the model is calibrated to even kind of like very weird situations, right? And so I imagine what Waymo has here is this really robust data labeling pipeline that they've set up for the last 5-10 years that they've been doing this, where as soon as the model, as you were saying, gets kind of confused, it uses that as like this like really rich opportunity to gather data that is hard to come by otherwise, right? Like these really weird situations.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine that like the car's driving around and all of a sudden like an elephant has escaped from the zoo. How often does that happen? Like once in a million, right? Once in a billion?
Trillion, yeah.
Trillion?
Yeah.
But it's going to happen at some point.
And it needs to be able to handle it.
And it has to be able to handle it, right? And so if Waymo can have this data pipeline to automatically label this data, send that over to someone in the Philippines in this case, and label that data, that gives them a tremendous advantage over other companies that might not be collecting this data, right? So I think rather than this being framed as like a negative thing, I think like Waymo probably uses this as part of their secret sauce for what makes them so good, is their ability to collect these weird situations, like these like weird data points, right? And so I think what you're saying is right. I don't think it's someone with a joystick. I think it's just like a really robust active learning pipeline that they've set up fundamentally, right? That said, like I do wonder what happens in situations where, like when there was like this big flooding here in the city, right? And the Waymos all got really confused because of the traffic lights. Someone does have to override the model so that the models can continue following their policy. I don't know if that's like someone in the Philippines doing that, or if there's like some other system that can be
some
used.
Tactical squads, some like SEAL Team.
The way that I imagine is, yeah, the way I imagine what's happening here is like there's an active learning pipeline where the model, whenever it gets confused, sends that data to someone in the Philippines in this case, who's labeling that data. And then there must also be some other set of folks for when the model gets in a real pickle, like maybe someone's like crashed into the car, for then the car to be able to like debug itself, right?
Yeah.
I don't know like what that looks like. And in this clip, I don't think they actually talk about that. I think that the senator just has these like talking points that he wants to stress in order to be able to use that in future campaign videos, you know what I mean? To show to his constituents that he's like pressing these like Silicon Valley tech companies.
Pina.
Yeah, exactly. He's being hard on these like Silicon Valley companies. But the details are like really interesting. But as I said, yeah, there's definitely no one with a joystick in the Philippines driving these cars around. And what they're talking about here in some sense is like the bread and butter of what has made Waymo so good, which is like their ability to collect this data, you know?
100%.
Yeah.
Well, Richard, that's actually a great note that maybe we should talk about the Waymo world model the next episode, because I feel like all these threads are starting to converge around like this active learning pipeline that they have combined with DeepMind world models, the Genie, we talked about that on a previous episode. Yep. And then there's this new Waymo world model, which is specifically for LiDAR driving scenarios, which is so crazy. Cool. Yeah. I don't know if that's where you got the elephant example, but that was one of the things that they showed.
I saw that.
Bingo. So super cool. Relates to this exactly. It's like a way to kind of synthesize additional data points that are unlikely to happen in the wild. Seems shockingly accurate. We'll leave that for next episode. But we've got a very exciting deep dive coming on Friday. Yeah,
yes,
me
sir.
too.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll talk then.
Talk then, buddy.
See you, buddy.
Alrighty.
Cheers.
See ya. Bye. You should tell our viewership where these beans come from.
So, well, it's actually it's a funny story.
Yeah. What's the story?
You know, one might think San Francisco, coffee capital of the United States. Obviously, there's some fantastic roasteries here. Do we source our beans from any of them? No, we don't, Richard. Beans that are served in the Café à Freeman are imported only from the Arctic region.
That's crazy.
There's something about this. This is true. This is true. It's not why we like the beans. It's that this actual roastery is just really good. They make good stuff. But you know, in some very abstract way, don't you want it to go from just the absolute hottest of the hot to the coldest of the cold?
You basically make your beans go through a sauna.
That's
love
exactly
it.
Right. Yeah.
They're doing a little ice plunge.
Yeah, you make them sweat.
Yeah, make them sweat, then a little ice plunge.
So no, it's true. Yeah. And we started ordering so many from this company because it's kind of inconvenient. You know what I mean? We have to go to their website. We place these orders. We go through a lot of beans. Big bean drinkers in this household.
Say that 6
totally.
times.
Say that 6 times fast. And so eventually they just contacted me. They called me up. This very nice woman. She was like, you know, Mr. Freeman, we've noticed some unusual activity within your coffee buying account. Are you sourcing this for commercial purposes?
Oh my God.
I was like, oh no, don't get the wrong idea. I would like never do you guys dirty like that. It's just like a small residential operation. And she's like, okay, well, you know, you're totally welcome to do that as well. But just know that we actually have some wholesale bulk discounts.
Oh, no way.
That you qualify for
so
because of how many. So yes.
Dude, you're an importer exporter.
I'm now officially a bean distributor.
So you're getting the wholesale deal from them?
Yeah.
Whoa,
we order so many beans.
Can you cut me into this somehow, dude?
You want a little bit of the good?
I'm kind of interested.
I mean, the way you've been pulling shots today.
Dude.
You could be a barista.
I think I went through like a quarter of your stash, dude.
You're
gonna have to help you out.
You're still dialing in those beans, dude.